Frank Fritz was best known to millions of television viewers as one half of the famous duo on American Pickers. But long before the cameras followed him across dusty barns and back roads, he was simply a curious boy with a deep love for old things and forgotten stories. Born on October 11, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa, Frank grew up in a quiet Midwestern environment where history was not found in museums, but in attics, garages, and barns that people had long ignored. While many children his age were focused on sports or toys, Frank was drawn to objects that carried a past. He wanted to know where things came from, who owned them, and why they mattered. This early curiosity shaped the direction of his entire life. Frank's interest in antiques did not appear by accident. His parents were collectors themselves, and their home was filled with items that sparked his imagination. They encouraged him to explore flea markets, garage sales, and small antique shops, teaching him how to recognize value beyond appearance. These experiences helped Frank develop a sharp eye for detail at a very young age. He learned that a rusty sign or a worn tool could carry historical importance, even if others saw it as junk. This mindset would later become the foundation of his career. As Frank grew older, his passion for collecting only deepened. He spent countless weekends searching for hidden treasures, often traveling long distances just for the chance to uncover something unique. Despite this passion, he initially chose a stable and responsible career path. For more than 25 years, Frank worked as a fire and safety inspector, a job that required discipline and attention to detail. While this career provided financial security, it never replaced his true love for antiques. Picking remained his escape, his joy, and the place where he felt most alive. During these years, Frank quietly built a reputation within the antique collecting community. Other collectors recognized his ability to spot valuable items in places most people would overlook. He was known not just for what he found, but for how he found it. Frank took time to listen to people's stories, understanding that the history behind an item was often more important than its price. His respectful and down-to-earth nature made sellers trust him, which often led to rare opportunities others never received. Eventually, Frank realized that antiques were more than a hobby. They were his true calling. Taking a bold risk, he left a steady job to pursue picking full-time. This decision was not easy, but Frank believed deeply in the idea that history deserved to be preserved. He opened an antique shop called Frank's Finds, where he displayed unique and meaningful items for collectors and history lovers. The shop quickly became popular, attracting people who appreciated Frank's knowledge and honest approach. It was clear that he had found his place. This growing success set the stage for the opportunity that would change his life forever. When Frank teamed up with his longtime friend Mike Wolfe, their shared passion and chemistry created something special. What started as two friends searching for antiques soon evolved into a television concept that would capture the hearts of millions. Frank's journey from a small-town collector to a nationally recognized television personality was built on years of dedication, curiosity, and love for the past. His rise to fame was not sudden. It was a result of a lifetime spent honoring forgotten stories. The launch of American Pickers in 2010 marked a turning point in Frank Fritz's life. The show, which aired on the History Channel, followed Frank and his childhood friend Mike Wolfe as they traveled across the United States searching for hidden antiques and rare collectibles. What made the show unique was not just the items they found, but the way they found them. Viewers were invited into barns, basements, and backyards that held decades of forgotten history. Each discovery came with a story, and Frank played a major role in bringing those stories to life. Frank quickly became a fan favorite. His humor, honesty, and genuine excitement stood out on screen. Unlike many reality television personalities, he did not seem scripted or artificial. He spoke plainly, laughed easily, and treated people with respect. Audiences appreciated his ability to connect with sellers on a personal level, often learning about family history, personal struggles, and emotional attachments tied to the items being sold. Frank understood that antiques were not just objects, they were memories. His dynamic with Mike Wolfe was another key reason for the show's success. The two men had known each other since middle school and shared a deep bond built on years of friendship. Their chemistry felt natural, not forced. Mike often took on the role of the fast-talking negotiator, while Frank balanced him with a calmer, more thoughtful presence. Together, they created a rhythm that felt authentic and engaging. Viewers felt like they were watching two real friends, not actors playing a part. As the show grew in popularity, so did Frank's fame. American Pickers became one of the History Channel's most successful programs, drawing millions of viewers each week. With success came financial stability and recognition. Frank was no longer just a picker. He was a public figure. Fans recognized him everywhere, and his work inspired many people to explore antique collecting themselves. He became a respected name in the antique community, admired for his knowledge and passion. However, fame also brought pressure. Long filming schedules, constant travel, and the demands of television began to take a toll on Frank. While the show appeared fun and adventurous, it required long hours of physical labor and emotional energy. Digging through dusty barns, lifting heavy items, and driving for days at a time was exhausting, especially for someone already dealing with health issues. Behind the scenes, the lifestyle was far more challenging than it appeared on screen. Over time, cracks began to form in Frank's relationship with Mike Wolfe. As the show continued, Frank felt that he was slowly being pushed into the background. He believed Mike was receiving more credit and attention, while his own contributions were being overlooked. These feelings of being overshadowed created frustration and resentment. What once felt like a partnership between equals began to feel unbalanced in Frank's eyes. Despite their shared history and success, communication between the two friends started to break down. Fame changed the dynamics of their relationship, introducing stress and misunderstandings. While both men cared deeply about the show and each other, they struggled to navigate the pressures that came with success. This tension would later play a major role in Frank's personal and professional struggles, setting the stage for the challenges that followed. While audiences continued to enjoy Frank Fritz's presence on American Pickers, few truly understood the personal battles he was fighting away from the cameras. For most of his adult life, Frank lived with Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory condition that affects the digestive system. The illness caused severe pain, fatigue, and weight fluctuations, making everyday life unpredictable. Managing this condition required constant attention, medication, and mental strength, especially while maintaining a demanding television career. Frank was open about his health struggles, hoping to raise awareness and encourage others facing similar challenges. However, openness did not make the condition easier to live with. The physical demands of filming often worsened his symptoms. Long days on the road, irregular meals, and constant stress made managing Crohn's disease even more difficult. Fans noticed his changing appearance over the years, often expressing concern about his weight loss and overall health in addition to his physical illness. Frank struggled with addiction. Alcohol became a coping mechanism, a way to escape the emotional pressure and frustration he felt. Over time, his drinking became more serious, affecting his health, relationships, and professional life. In a 2021 interview, Frank admitted that he had entered rehab to seek help for alcohol abuse. This admission shocked many fans, but also revealed the depth of his struggle. Frank's challenges intensified after suffering a serious back injury that required surgery. To manage the pain, he was prescribed opioid medication. Unfortunately, like many people, he became dependent on these drugs. The combination of alcohol and prescription medication created a dangerous cycle that further distanced him from those who cared about him. His health continued to decline, and his ability to function at his best was severely impacted. These personal struggles directly affected his role on American Pickers. In 2021, Frank officially left the show, citing health issues and recovery efforts. Initially, details surrounding his departure were unclear, leading to speculation and rumors. Later, it became evident that addiction, illness, and strained relationships all played a part. Fans were heartbroken, especially when reports emerged that Frank and Mike Wolfe had not spoken for nearly 2 years. The loss of the show marked a major turning point in Frank's life. He lost not only his job, but also a sense of purpose and identity. Isolation became a constant presence. Friends and colleagues attempted to help, staging interventions and encouraging treatment, but recovery was not a straight path. Frank sometimes believed he could handle things on his own, underestimating the strength of addiction. As time passed, the weight of regret and loss grew heavier. Frank had lost his platform, his routine, and the friendship that had defined much of his adult life. His struggles were no longer hidden behind humor and television editing. They were real, painful, and deeply personal. These years of decline would ultimately lead to the emotional admissions he made before his death, as he reflected on what he had lost and what truly mattered. As Frank Fritz's personal struggles became more difficult to manage, the tension between him and Mike Wolfe slowly moved from private frustration to public reality. What once looked like a strong and unbreakable friendship began to show visible cracks. Frank later shared that he often felt sidelined as the show grew larger and more commercial. In his view, the focus increasingly shifted toward Mike Wolfe, while his own role seemed to shrink with each passing season. Whether this perception matched reality or not, the emotional impact on Frank was very real. Frank believed that he was no longer being treated as an equal partner on American Pickers. He noticed fewer appearances, less creative input, and decisions being made without his involvement. These feelings were deeply painful because the show was built on a friendship that stretched back decades. For Frank, American Pickers was never just a job. It was a shared dream of two boys who grew up chasing history together. Feeling pushed aside from that dream cut deeply into his sense of self-worth. The situation worsened when Frank took time away from filming to focus on his health and addiction recovery. During this break, communication between him and Mike weakened further. Frank expected support and understanding from his longtime friend, but instead felt forgotten. He later expressed disappointment that Mike did not reach out as much as he had hoped. This silence, whether intentional or not, fueled resentment and misunderstanding on both sides. When Frank officially left American Pickers in 2021, the announcement left fans confused and heartbroken. Early explanations focused on health concerns, but the deeper emotional issues were not immediately discussed. Speculation filled the gap, and rumors spread quickly online. Frank later gave interviews where he openly admitted that he felt hurt by how things ended. He shared that he had not spoken to Mike Wolfe in nearly 2 years, a shocking revelation considering their lifelong friendship. This separation marked a period of deep isolation for Frank. Without the structure of the show, his daily routine disappeared. The constant travel, the excitement of picking, and the sense of purpose were suddenly gone. He found himself spending more time alone, reflecting on what he had lost. The combination of declining health, addiction recovery, and broken relationships created an emotional weight that was difficult to carry. Friends and colleagues tried to help, urging him to stay focused on recovery and rebuild his life. While Frank appreciated their concern, he often struggled to accept help consistently. Pride, frustration, and exhaustion made it difficult for him to fully commit to healing. The isolation he experienced during this time only intensified his feelings of regret and sadness. This chapter of Frank's life was marked by silence rather than adventure, reflection instead of discovery. The man who once thrived on human connection and shared stories now faces battles largely alone. It was during this period that Frank began to confront the reality of his choices and the consequences they had brought, setting the stage for the emotional realizations that would follow. In July 2022, Frank Fritz's life took a devastating turn when he suffered a severe stroke. The medical emergency permanently altered his physical and mental abilities, leaving him unable to care for himself independently. For fans who had watched him travel the country with endless energy and enthusiasm, the news was difficult to accept. The stroke marked the final separation between Frank and the life he once knew. Following the stroke, Frank was placed under legal guardianship. This decision was made to ensure his safety and proper medical care, but also symbolized how much his independence had been taken from him. He was moved into a care facility, where he spent his remaining months receiving treatment and assistance. The transition was emotionally challenging for someone who had spent most of his life on the road, in control of his work and decisions. Life in the care facility was quiet compared to Frank's former lifestyle. Gone were the road trips, the excitement of discovery, and the constant interactions with collectors and fans. Instead, his days were filled with therapy sessions, medical appointments, and long periods of reflection. Despite these limitations, those who visited him noted that his personality still shined through. Frank continued to share stories, laugh at old memories, and speak fondly of the adventures he once had. Though his body had weakened, his love for antiques and history never disappeared. Friends recalled moments when Frank would talk about past finds or ask questions about items he had once admired. Even in this new reality, his identity as a picker remained deeply rooted. It was clear that collecting had not just been a career for Frank. It was part of who he was, Emotionally, this period forced Frank to confront many unresolved feelings. The quiet environment gave him time to think about his relationships, especially his estrangement from Mike Wolfe. Without distractions, regret became harder to ignore. Frank reflected on missed opportunities, harsh words spoken during moments of frustration, and the years lost to addiction at the same time. The stroke served as a wake-up call for those around him. It reminded everyone, including Mike Wolfe, that time was limited. Old disagreements seemed less important when faced with the reality of mortality. This shift in perspective would eventually lead to attempts at reconciliation, as both men began to understand what truly mattered. Frank's life after the stroke was no longer defined by fame or success. Instead, it became a period of honesty, vulnerability, and emotional reckoning. The man who had spent decades preserving the past now found himself looking inward, searching for peace in the final chapter of his life. As Frank Fritz adjusted to life after his stroke, something began to change within him. The physical limitations and quiet surroundings forced him to confront emotions he had avoided for years. Fame, stress, and addiction had once filled his days with noise, but now silence gave space for reflection. During this time, Frank began to openly admit the regrets that had weighed heavily on his heart, especially those connected to his friendship with Mike Wolfe. For years, Frank had carried the belief that he had been pushed aside, that his role in American Pickers had slowly faded while Mike became the face of the show. In his final months, however, Frank started to view those years with greater clarity. He acknowledged that his illness and addiction had shaped his reactions and words more than he had realized at the time. While his feelings of hurt were genuine, he admitted that resentment had kept him from seeing the full picture. Mike Wolfe, who had always maintained that he cared deeply about Frank, eventually reached out. News of Frank's stroke served as a powerful reminder that time was running out. Old disagreements felt small compared to the possibility of losing a lifelong friend. When the two men reconnected, the conversations were emotional and honest. There were no cameras, no negotiations, and no show. Just two friends facing the truth of their shared past. Frank finally admitted that fame had changed him in ways he never expected. He spoke about how pressure and expectations made him feel trapped, and how addiction became an escape from those feelings. He expressed regret for the harsh words he had spoken publicly and privately, acknowledging that they were born from pain rather than anger. Most importantly, Frank admitted that he never stopped valuing Mike's friendship, even during the years when they were not speaking. These admissions brought a sense of peace that Frank had been searching for. He realized that while he could not change the past, he could choose how to face the end of his journey. Letting go of resentment lifted an emotional burden that had followed him for years. For Mike, hearing Frank's honesty provided clarity and closure. It allowed both men to understand each other beyond misunderstandings and media narratives. Their reconciliation did not erase the pain of the past, but softened it. The friendship that had once been strained by fame and illness found its way back to its roots. Mutual respect, shared memories, and genuine care. In these final admissions, Frank accepted responsibility for his mistakes while also forgiving himself. It was a quiet but powerful moment of truth that defined the closing chapter of his life. Frank Fritz spent his final days away from the spotlight, surrounded by caregivers and a small circle of people who truly knew him. The energy that once drove him across the country had faded, but his presence still carried warmth and familiarity. Friends who visited described moments of laughter, reflection, and calm acceptance. Frank understood that his journey was coming to an end, and he faced it with a quiet sense of peace. During this time, Frank reflected deeply on his life. He spoke about his love for antiques, the joy of discovery, and the countless stories he had helped preserve. He acknowledged that while his path had been filled with success, it had also been shaped by struggle. Addiction, illness, and broken relationships had taken much from him, but they had also taught him important lessons about humility and forgiveness. Mike Wolfe remained present during this period, offering support and reassurance. Their renewed bond brought comfort to both men. In private moments, Mike reminded Frank that he was never forgotten and that his contributions to American Pickers would always be remembered. These conversations were not about the show or business, but about friendship, gratitude, and letting go. When Frank Fritz passed away, the news sent a wave of sadness through the American Pickers community and beyond. Fans who had followed his journey for over a decade felt the loss deeply. For many, Frank was not just a television personality, but a familiar face who brought history to life in an approachable way. His death marked the end of an era for the show and the fans who grew up watching it. Though his final chapter was marked by illness, it was also defined by reconciliation and honesty. Frank did not leave this world carrying unresolved anger. Instead, he left having admitted his regrets, expressed gratitude, and reconnected with a friendship that had shaped much of his life. His passing was not just an ending, but a quiet resolution to a complicated story. Frank Fritz's journey reminds us that life is rarely simple. Success can exist alongside struggle, and joy can be followed by pain. In his final days, Frank accepted this truth, finding peace in honesty and connection. His story ended not with bitterness, but with understanding. When news of Frank Fritz's passing became public, an outpouring of emotion followed almost immediately. Fans from around the world shared memories, favorite moments, and heartfelt messages across social media platforms. For many viewers, Frank had been a constant presence in their lives for over a decade. His familiar voice, warm laugh, and genuine excitement made him feel less like a television star and more like a friend welcomed into their homes each week. Longtime fans of American Pickers remembered Frank for his humor and authenticity. Many recalled his witty one-liners, his excitement when uncovering a rare find, and his respectful way of listening to people's stories. Viewers often noted that Frank never treated sellers as obstacles to a deal. Instead, he valued their memories and experiences, which made each interaction feel human and meaningful. These qualities helped him stand out in a genre often criticized for being overly scripted or profit-driven. Members of the American Pickers cast also paid tribute. Mike Wolfe released a heartfelt statement honoring their years of friendship and shared history. While acknowledging the challenges they faced, Mike emphasized the love and respect that remained between them. His words reflected gratitude for the memories they created and sorrow for the struggles Frank endured. Danielle Colby, another familiar face in the show, shared memories of traveling together and highlighted Frank's passion for antiques and storytelling. Beyond the cast, members of the antique and collector communities expressed deep appreciation for Frank's influence. Many credited American Pickers with inspiring them to explore history through everyday objects. Frank's approach showed that value was not only measured in money, but in stories and craftsmanship. Antique shop owners, collectors, and history enthusiasts shared stories of how Frank's work encouraged them to look more closely at the past around them. Fans also spoke openly about the lessons they learned from Frank's life. His struggles with illness and addiction resonated with many who faced similar challenges. Viewers admired his honesty and vulnerability, especially when he chose to speak publicly about seeking help. These admissions helped reduce stigma and reminded people that even those who appear successful can face deep personal battles. As tributes continued to pour in, it became clear that Frank's impact reached far beyond television ratings. He had created a connection with audiences based on sincerity and curiosity. While his life ended too soon, the memories he left behind continue to bring comfort and inspiration. In remembering Frank Fritz, fans celebrated not only the picker, but the person behind the finds. Frank Fritz's legacy is deeply woven into the history of American Pickers and the broader world of antique collecting. He helped transform what many people once considered junk into meaningful pieces of history. By highlighting the stories behind objects, Frank showed that the past lives on through everyday items. This perspective reshaped how audiences viewed antiques, encouraging appreciation rather than dismissal. One of Frank's greatest contributions was his emphasis on preservation over profit. While deals and negotiations were part of the show, Frank often focused on ensuring items found new life rather than quick resale. He valued craftsmanship, originality, and historical significance. This mindset influenced countless viewers, many of whom began exploring flea markets, estate sales, and family heirlooms with renewed curiosity. Frank also left an impact through his authenticity. In an era where reality television often feels manufactured, his presence felt genuine. He did not pretend to be perfect, nor did he hide his struggles. By sharing his battles with Crohn's disease and addiction, Frank humanized the idea of success. His willingness to speak openly helped others feel less alone in their own struggles. Within the show, Frank helped define what it meant to be a picker. He demonstrated that patience, respect, and listening were just as important as knowledge. His interactions with sellers were built on trust, not pressure. This approach became a defining element of American Pickers, setting it apart from similar programs. Even after leaving the show, Frank's influence remained. Fans continued to revisit old episodes, sharing clips and favorite moments. His absence was felt, but his contribution was never forgotten. New generations of viewers discovered American Pickers through reruns, meeting Frank for the first time and connecting with his passion. Frank Fritz may no longer be here, but the values he stood for continue to resonate. His love for history, honesty, and connection created a lasting impression that extended beyond television. His legacy is not just measured by episodes aired or items found, but by the curiosity he sparked and the stories he preserved. The story of Frank Fritz is one of passion, success, struggle, and reflection. From a young boy fascinated by forgotten objects to a television star who brought history into millions of homes, his journey was both inspiring and complex. Frank's life reminds us that behind every public figure is a human being shaped by choices, challenges, and emotions. Frank achieved something rare. He turned a lifelong passion into a career that touched countless lives. Through American Pickers, he helped people see beauty in the overlooked and value in the forgotten. His enthusiasm made history accessible, showing that it exists not only in books and museums, but in barns, garages, and everyday spaces at the same time. Frank's struggles serve as a powerful reminder of the cost of fame and unaddressed pain. Illness and addiction slowly took their toll, affecting his relationships and sense of self. His story highlights the importance of compassion, understanding, and seeking help when it is needed. Before his death, Frank finally admitted the regrets he carried and the love he still held for those who mattered most. These admissions did not erase the past, but they brought peace. By reconciling with Mike Wolfe and accepting responsibility for his mistakes, Frank closed his life's chapter with honesty and humility. In the end, Frank Fritz will be remembered not for his struggles alone, but for his passion, humor, and heart. He showed that preserving history is about preserving human stories. His journey encourages us to look closer, listen deeper, and appreciate the connections that give meaning to our lives. That Frank's legacy lives on the objects he saved, the stories he shared, and the fans who continue to remember him. Though his life was marked by challenges, it was also defined by purpose. And in that purpose, Frank Fritz found his place in history. Frank Fritz's life also offers a deeper lesson about fame and how quietly it can change a person. When American Pickers became a massive success, Frank was suddenly recognized everywhere he went. For someone who loved quiet road trips, small towns, and simple conversations with strangers, this kind of attention was not always easy to handle. Fame brought opportunities, but it also brought pressure, expectations, and a loss of privacy that slowly weighed on him. Those close to Frank often describe him as someone who enjoyed the journey more than the spotlight. He loved the hunt for hidden treasures, the early mornings, and the long drives between small towns. These moments gave him peace. However, as the show grew bigger, schedules became tighter and responsibilities increased. The relaxed rhythm that once defined his work slowly disappeared. Replacing joy with stress, Frank's story reminds viewers that success does not protect a person from pain. Even with money, recognition, and loyal fans, he struggled internally. His health issues made everyday life difficult, and his addiction became a way to cope with emotional and physical discomfort. These struggles were not signs of weakness, but signs of someone fighting battles that many people never see. One of the most important lessons Frank leaves behind is the importance of compassion. It is easy for the public to judge celebrities when they disappear from the spotlight or behave differently. Frank's decline showed how quickly people forget that television personalities are real human beings. His journey encourages audiences to respond with understanding instead of criticism, especially when someone is clearly struggling. Frank also taught viewers the value of slowing down. In a fast-moving world focused on new technology and instant results, he reminded people to look backward and appreciate what already exists. Old signs, rusted tools, and forgotten furniture became symbols of memory and identity through his eyes. He showed that every object has a story. Just like every person, in the end, Frank Fritz's life was not defined by one final admission or one tragic ending. It was defined by curiosity, honesty, and a genuine love for history and people. His journey leaves behind a quiet message. Success means little without peace, and understanding matters more than judgment. Through this lesson, Frank Fritz continues to speak to those who are willing to listen.